My name is Bailey, 34 years old, and I never thought my own family would betray me so completely. When my nephew spit into my dinner plate and announced my brother-in-law said I deserved it, everyone laughed. What hurt most wasn't the disgusting act, but their unified enjoyment of my humiliation. That night changed everything, forcing me to finally value myself. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I finally stood up for myself after years of being used. Growing up as the oldest child in my family shaped me in ways I only recently came to understand. From an early age, I learned to take responsibility not only for myself, but also for my younger siblings, Natalie and Kyle. This dynamic began when our father Thomas passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack when I was just 14. Natalie was 11 at the time, and Kyle was only 8. Our mother Margaret did her best, but she was overwhelmed with grief and the sudden responsibility of raising 3 children alone. She worked 2 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. This meant I quickly stepped into a parental role. While other teenagers were hanging out with friends or playing sports, I was cooking dinner, helping with homework, and making sure the house ran smoothly. I never resented this role at first. My siblings were young, and they needed someone to look after them. I loved them fiercely and wanted to protect them from feeling the full weight of our father's absence. But looking back now, I realized something unhealthy began to form in our family structure. My mother, perhaps out of guilt or simply trying to compensate for their father's absence, developed a pattern of coddling Natalie and Kyle. Bailey is so mature for his age, she would tell relatives. He can handle it. We need to make sure the younger ones feel secure. This became the unspoken family mantra. As we grew older, the pattern solidified. When I turned 18, I immediately started working full-time while attending community college at night. Meanwhile, Kyle was encouraged to enjoy his youth and not worry so much. When Natalie had trouble in school, my mother would spend hours helping her, while I was expected to figure things out on my own. Natalie married Brian when she was 26. He came from a wealthy family and worked at his father's law firm. They had Lucas shortly after. From the beginning, there was something about Brian that made me uncomfortable. He had a way of looking at people as if measuring their worth based on their bank account. When we first met, he asked about my career and education before anything else. "So, community college, huh?" he had said, not bothering to hide his smirk. Interesting choice. Kyle, the baby of the family, continued the pattern of never quite launching into adulthood. He bounced between jobs, apartments, and relationships. Whenever things got tough, he would show up at our mother's house with his bags packed, and she would welcome him with open arms. "He just needs a little more time to find himself," she would say when I expressed concern about his lack of direction. Despite the uneven dynamics, I continued to forge my own path. Through hard work and determination, I built a successful career in financial planning. The irony wasn't lost on me that I helped others secure their futures while my own family continued to drain my resources. 3 years ago, when our mother faced foreclosure on her house, I stepped in without hesitation. The mortgage was underwater, and she was facing eviction. I agreed to pay 65% of her monthly mortgage payment to keep her in the family home where we all grew up. It was a significant financial commitment, but she was my mother, and that house held all our memories of our father. "Bailey, you're a lifesaver," she had said, hugging me tightly. "I don't know what we would do without you." What struck me was her use of we instead of I. It was as if my financial support wasn't just for her but for our entire family unit. The house became the default gathering place for all holidays and family events. Natalie, Brian, and Lucas would visit every weekend. Kyle practically lived there half the time. The first signs that something was deeply wrong in our family dynamic emerged gradually. When I brought expensive gifts for birthdays or Christmas, they were accepted without much gratitude, almost as if they were expected. When I helped Kyle get a job at my friend's company, he quit after 3 months without even telling me, leaving me to apologize to my friend. "You know how Kyle is," my mother said. "He needs to find something that really speaks to his passion." Meanwhile, Natalie began to change after marrying Brian. The sister who once shared secrets with me and came to me for advice became increasingly distant. She would cancel our lunch plans last minute, or spend our time together texting Brian. When I mentioned this, she dismissed my concerns. "Brian needs me available," she would say. "You wouldn't understand what it's like being in a real partnership." The subtle jabs hurt more than outright criticism. The implication was always the same. My life was somehow less valid because I was single, focused on my career instead of starting a family. The fact that I was supporting our mother financially, while they enjoyed the benefits, never seemed to factor into their assessment of my life choices. Each family gathering became a subtle battlefield. Brian would make comments about the real world versus playing with other people's money in reference to my career. Kyle would ask to borrow my car or my laptop, returning them damaged, if at all. And through it all, my mother would smile nervously and change the subject whenever tensions rose. I told myself I was being oversensitive. After all, this was family. Families tease each other, have disagreements, but at the end of the day, they're still family. I clung to the memories of us as children, of protecting Natalie from bullies at school, of teaching Kyle to ride a bike. Surely those bonds meant something, but the inequality continued to grow. When Kyle needed money for rent, when Natalie needed a sitter for Lucas, when our mother's water heater broke, I was always the first person they called. And I always came through, believing that's what family does for each other. What I didn't realize was that I had become an ATM with legs to them, a resource to be tapped whenever needed, but not a person with needs of my own. And the events of that fateful dinner would finally force me to see the truth that had been staring me in the face for years. The tension with Brian began to escalate about 2 years into his marriage with Natalie. At first, his disdain was subtle backhanded compliments about my modest apartment or questions about when I would get a real investment portfolio instead of just a retirement account. But as my career advanced and I began to achieve genuine success, his attitude shifted from dismissive to openly hostile. I remember the exact moment I realized Brian wasn't just rude but actively resented me. We were at Lucas's 3rd birthday party, and I had just received a promotion at work. Natalie had asked about it, seemingly proud of her big brother, when Brian interrupted. "Let's not bore everyone with talk about money shuffling," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Some of us actually build things and help people in the real world." Brian was a patent attorney who primarily helped wealthy clients protect their inventions, hardly saving lives or building bridges himself. But the pointed attack silenced the conversation, and Natalie quickly changed the subject. That same day, I noticed Brian pulling Lucas aside after the child had given me a big hug. Though I couldn't hear the conversation, Lucas's face fell, and he avoided me for the rest of the party. Later, when I offered to take my nephew to the zoo the following weekend, Lucas looked at his father before responding. "Dad says you're too busy counting money to spend time with family," Lucas said innocently, clearly repeating something he'd heard. Brian laughed it off as just a joke, but the message was clear. He was poisoning my relationship with my own nephew. Natalie's transformation was perhaps the most painful to witness. As teenagers, we had been confidants. When she was 16 and had her heart broken by her first boyfriend, I was the one who bought ice cream and sat with her all night. When she got into college, I helped her move into her dorm and set up her new life. We had been close, protective of each other, but Brian had a particular talent for isolation. He would question why she needed to spend time with me when they could be together. He would check in constantly when she was out with me, claiming he just missed her. Slowly, our weekly coffee dates became monthly, then quarterly, then special occasions only. "Brian says we need to prioritize building our own family traditions," she explained when canceling our annual siblings' Christmas shopping trip. "Plus, you know how Lucas gets when his routine is disrupted." The most telling change was how she responded when Brian made his cutting remarks. Initially, she would look uncomfortable, sometimes even apologizing to me later, via text. But gradually, she began to laugh along, or worse, join in. "Bailey has always been so serious about money," she said at one family dinner, after I declined to loan Kyle several $100s on the spot. Even as a kid, he would count his allowance 3 times before spending a penny. The memory she referenced was completely fabricated. As the eldest, I rarely had allowance to count. Most of my money went to buying school supplies or ingredients to cook family dinners. But the narrative of me, as cheap and money-obsessed, had taken hold. Kyle, meanwhile, continued his pattern of using me as a safety net without any reciprocity. He would call with emergencies that always required immediate financial assistance: car repairs, overdue rent, medical bills for minor issues. I lost count of how many times I had bailed him out, always with the promise that this time is different and he would pay me back. "You know I'm good for it," he would say. "Things are just tight right now." Things were always tight for Kyle, despite him working less than 30 hours a week and spending lavishly on gaming equipment and nights out with friends. He once asked to borrow $5,000 for a business opportunity that turned out to be investing in his friend's pyramid scheme. When I brought it up 6 months later, he acted offended. "Why are you so hung up on money all the time?" he asked. "It's not like you don't have plenty. Mom always says you just don't understand what it's like to struggle." That comment revealed so much about the conversations happening when I wasn't around. My mother, who I supported financially, was apparently portraying me as some kind of miserly rich uncle, rather than the son who kept a roof over her head. As for my mother, Margaret, her role in all this was perhaps the most complex. She wasn't deliberately cruel like Brian, or selfishly opportunistic like Kyle. Instead, she was the great enabler. She would smooth over conflicts, make excuses for bad behavior, and generally maintain the fiction that we were a loving, supportive family. "Brian is just protective of Natalie," she would say. "Kyle is still finding his way. They both admire you so much, Bailey. They just express it differently." Her greatest skill was reframing reality to avoid confrontation. When Kyle borrowed my laptop and returned it with a cracked screen, she said, "He feels terrible about it, but accidents happen in families." When Brian made cutting remarks about my career at Thanksgiving dinner, she quickly jumped in with, "Who wants more pie?" When Natalie canceled plans with me for the 3rd time in a row, my mother assured me, "She's just so busy with Lucas. You remember how it was when you were all small." The comparison stung. Yes, I remembered those years because I had been the one helping raise Natalie and Kyle while our mother worked. Yet somehow, Natalie's responsibilities to her single child were portrayed as more demanding than what I had shouldered as a teenager. As the tensions escalated, I began to see the patterns more clearly, but still clung to the hope that my family valued me beyond what I could provide financially. I made attempts to connect on a more personal level. I invited Kyle to join me for a weekend hiking trip, thinking some brother bonding might help reset our relationship. He agreed enthusiastically, but texted the night before to cancel because his friends had tickets to a concert. I tried to arrange a siblings-only dinner with Natalie, hoping to reconnect without Brian's influence. She suggested bringing Lucas along, then showed up with both Lucas and Brian, explaining that her husband had nothing else to do that night. With my mother, I tried having an honest conversation about feeling used by the family. She listened teary-eyed, promised things would change, then called me the next day to ask if I could cover the property taxes on the house because they were higher than expected this year. The week before the fateful dinner, there were warning signs I should have heeded. My mother called to invite me but mentioned casually that we would be celebrating Natalie's promotion. My sister hadn't told me about any promotion, despite us texting about an unrelated matter just days earlier. Kyle sent a strange message asking if I was still driving the Audi, followed by questions about its resale value. In retrospect, he was likely assessing what assets I had that might benefit him. And Natalie sent a group text about the dinner with specific instructions. "Mom says to be on time, and Bailey, please don't bring up anything about work. Let's keep it light and positive." The stage was set for disaster, and I walked right into it, still believing in the family that existed only in my memories. The evening of the dinner, I arrived at my mother's house precisely on time. I had spent the afternoon cooking a special dish, my father's famous lasagna recipe, that had always been a family favorite. Dad used to make it for special occasions, and after he passed, I had taken up the tradition. It seemed appropriate for celebrating Natalie's promotion, a way to honor our past while acknowledging her achievement. The spring air was mild as I carefully carried the heavy glass baking dish from my car to the front door. I had to ring the bell with my elbow, hands full with the lasagna and a bottle of expensive champagne I'd brought for a toast. Kyle answered the door, phone in hand, barely looking up as he stepped aside to let me in. "Oh, you brought food," he said, his tone suggesting this was somehow inconvenient rather than considerate. "Dad's lasagna," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. I thought it would be nice for Natalie's celebration. "Mom already made pasta," Kyle said, walking away without offering to help me carry anything. The house smelled of garlic and tomato sauce, and I could hear voices from the dining room. As I entered, I noticed everyone was already seated around the table. My mother, Natalie, Brian, Lucas, and Kyle's empty chair. There was no place set for me. "Bailey, you're here," my mother said, looking flustered. She stood up quickly. "Let me get you a place setting." "Sorry, we started without you," Natalie said, though I had arrived exactly at 7 as requested. Lucas was hungry. Brian didn't even pretend to be apologetic. He looked at the lasagna in my hands and raised an eyebrow. Margaret already made spaghetti. "We don't need 2 pasta dishes." I stood there awkwardly, holding my carefully prepared contribution, while everyone looked at me as if I had committed some sort of faux pas. My mother hurried to set a place for me at the far end of the table, away from the rest of the family who were clustered at the other end. "You can put your dish in the kitchen," she said. "We can have it tomorrow." I placed the champagne on the table. "I brought this to celebrate Natalie's promotion. Congratulations, by the way. What's the new position?" There was an odd pause before Natalie smiled tightly. "Senior Corporate Counsel. It's not a big deal, just more responsibility and a small raise." "Don't be modest," Brian interjected, putting his arm around her shoulders. "She's now the youngest senior counsel in the firm's history. She's practically running the department." "That's amazing," I said sincerely. "I'd love to hear more about it." Brian cut in before Natalie could respond. "It's boring legal stuff. You wouldn't understand the complexities." "I work with corporate legal teams all the time," I reminded him. "It's a big part of financial planning." "Right. Your money-shuffling business," Brian said with a dismissive laugh. "Not quite the same as actual legal practice." I took my seat at the end of the table, feeling increasingly isolated. My mother placed a plate of spaghetti in front of me, the sauce clearly from a jar, nothing like the homemade recipe in my lasagna. "So, Uncle Bailey," Lucas said, looking up from his tablet, which he had been allowed to bring to the dinner table. "Dad says you live alone because you love money more than people. Is that true?" The table went quiet. I looked at Brian, who had a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Lucas, that's not appropriate dinner conversation," Natalie said. But her reprimand lacked any real conviction. "I'm just curious," Lucas insisted. "Dad says Uncle Bailey would rather count his dollars than have a real family." "Kids say the darndest things," my mother interjected with a nervous laugh. "Kyle, tell everyone about your new job interview." Kyle launched into a story about an interview for a position he was clearly unqualified for, acting as though it was already a done deal. "The starting salary is $90,000, he said, looking directly at me. "Not bad, right? Almost as much as you make." I earned considerably more than that, but I didn't correct him. Instead, I tried to be supportive. "That sounds promising. What company is it with?" "You wouldn't know them," he replied vaguely. "They're very exclusive." "Bailey, could you pass the garlic bread?" my mother asked, clearly trying to change the subject. As I reached for the basket, Brian started telling a story about a colleague who had been fired for embezzlement. He was one of those financial advisor types, he said pointedly, always talking about helping people grow their money, but really just helping himself to their accounts. "Not all financial advisors are criminals, honey," Natalie said, but she was smiling as she said it. "Most are just one audit away from prison," Brian replied, looking directly at me. "No offense, Bailey." I felt my appetite disappearing as the conversation continued in this vein. Every topic somehow circled back to a criticism of my career, my personal life, or my choices. When I tried to talk about a charity event I had recently attended, Kyle interrupted to ask if I was just doing it for the tax write-off. Throughout the meal, Lucas kept staring at me with a strange expression. Brian would whisper things to him, and they would both laugh. I tried to engage my nephew directly, asking about school and his interests, but his responses were monosyllabic at best. Lucas is very particular about who he talks to, Brian explained, as if my own nephew was a stranger to me. He has a strong sense of who's really family and who's just to around. The implication stung. I had been present for Lucas's birth, had bought his first bicycle, had taken him for ice cream countless times when he was younger. Now, at 8 years old, he was looking at me like I was a stranger he'd been warned against. When my mother brought out dessert store-bought cookies rather than the homemade pie she usually made for family celebrations, I noticed Lucas whispering something to Brian, who nodded slightly. What happened next seems almost surreal in retrospect. Lucas stood up from his chair, walked around the table to where I sat, and deliberately spit a mouthful of half-chewed cookie directly onto my plate. The sound of saliva and cookie crumbs hitting my plate echoed in the sudden silence. I looked up in shock, meeting Lucas's defiant gaze. "Dad says you deserve it," Lucas announced proudly. "He says you think you're better than everyone, but you're just a loser who nobody really likes." For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Then Brian let out a sharp laugh, which seemed to break the dam. Kyle snorted, nearly choking on his drink. Natalie covered her mouth, but her shoulders shook with suppressed giggles. Even my mother, after a moment of wide-eyed surprise, let out a small, uncomfortable chuckle. They were all laughing at this deliberate humiliation, this calculated act of disrespect. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity what I meant to them: nothing, less than nothing, a joke, a punching bag, a resource to be used and mocked. I didn't yell. I didn't flip the table or storm out dramatically. Instead, I carefully placed my napkin beside my soiled plate, stood up, and quietly said, "I think it's time for me to go." "Oh, Bailey, he's just a kid," my mother said, still fighting back laughter. "Don't be so sensitive." "Yeah, lighten up," Kyle added. "It was just a joke we've all wanted to make for years," Brian muttered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. I looked at Natalie, my sister, waiting for her to say something, to defend me, to show some sign that our bond still meant something to her. She looked down at her plate, saying nothing. Without another word, I walked out, closing the door softly behind me. As I got into my car, I could hear them laughing again through the open dining room window. The sound followed me all the way home, echoing in my ears like the death knell of every illusion I had maintained about my place in this family. The drive home passed in a blur. Streetlights streaked across my windshield as I navigated the familiar route on autopilot, my mind replaying the dinner scene over and over. The weight of what had happened settled heavy in my chest, making it difficult to breathe. This wasn't just a bad family dinner or a child's misbehavior. This was the culmination of years of disrespect, the mask finally slipping to reveal the ugly truth beneath. When I reached my apartment, I sat in the car for several long minutes, staring at nothing. The lasagna I had spent hours preparing was still at my mother's house, untouched. The champagne I had brought to celebrate my sister's achievement remained unopened. I had left with nothing but the crushing realization that the family I had sacrificed so much for saw me as nothing more than a resource to exploit and a target to ridicule. Inside my apartment, I mechanically went through the motions of my evening routine. I hung up my jacket, washed my face, and sat on the edge of my bed, still fully dressed. On my nightstand was a framed photograph from years ago: Natalie, Kyle, and me at the beach, arms around each other, smiling widely. I had been 22, working 2 jobs to help put Natalie through college. Kyle was 16, still full of potential and seemingly grateful for his big brother's guidance. Where had it all gone wrong? When had I transformed from beloved older brother to family laughingstock? I thought about the mortgage payments I made each month for my mother's house. 65% of the total amount automatically transferred from my account on the 1st of every month. I had never missed a payment in 3 years, even when it meant tightening my own budget. The house was where we had all grown up, where our father had taught me to throw a baseball in the backyard, where Natalie had taken her first steps. I couldn't bear the thought of my mother losing it. "Bailey is so mature for his age," she would tell relatives. "He can handle it." We need to make sure the younger ones feel secure. This became the unspoken family mantra. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text message notification illuminated the screen. It was from my mother, sent to our family group chat that included Natalie, Brian, Kyle, and me. Bailey, it read, "Your behavior tonight was unacceptable. Walking out like that humiliated all of us, especially after Lucas was just playing. If you can't handle family jokes, maybe it's better if you don't contact us again for a while, until you can be more reasonable." I stared at the message in disbelief. My behavior? I had quietly left after being literally spat upon, after being told to my face that I was despised by my own family, and somehow I was the one who had behaved unacceptably. Before I could respond, another notification appeared. Kyle had reacted to our mother's message with a thumbs-up emoji. No words, just a digital gesture of agreement that I was the problem, that I deserved what had happened. I waited, irrationally hoping that Natalie might chime in with a different perspective. Perhaps she would privately message me an apology, or at least acknowledge that what happened was wrong. But my phone remained silent. My sister, who I had helped raise after our father died, who I had supported through college and beyond, had nothing to say in my defense. In that moment, something broke inside me. Not in a destructive way, but in the way a fever breaks, bringing sudden clarity after a long delirium. For years I had been living in denial, telling myself that my family valued me for who I was, not just what I could provide. I had excused their behavior, made allowances for their disrespect, and continued to give and give, hoping that eventually they would see me the real me, not the caricature they had created. But they had shown me exactly how they saw me, and it was time I believed them. With steady hands, I typed my response. Understood. Mortgage auto-pay ends tomorrow. 6 simple words. No emotion, no accusations, just a straightforward statement of fact. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The moment my message appeared in the chat, I felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in years, I had established a boundary, had refused to accept treatment that diminished me. It wasn't about the money itself. It was about recognizing that relationships should be reciprocal, that love shouldn't come with conditions of servitude and silence. I placed my phone face down on the nightstand and prepared for bed. Whatever storm was brewing in response to my message could wait until morning. Tonight, I needed rest after years of carrying a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged until now. Just as I was about to turn off the bedside lamp, my phone began to vibrate continuously. The group chat was exploding with messages. At precisely 11:47 p.m., according to the timestamp, my family had realized the implications of my 6-word response. From my mother, "Bailey, what are you talking about? You can't be serious. Call me right now." From Kyle, "Dude, that's not funny. Mom needs that money." From Natalie, "Bailey, you're overreacting. Lucas is just a child. This is extremely immature of you." From Brian, "You would punish your own mother over a kid's joke? Shows what kind of person you really are." The messages kept coming, a flood of panic and indignation. My phone rang, my mother calling, then Kyle, then Natalie. I declined each call, watching as voicemail notifications replaced the missed call alerts. Out of curiosity, I listened to the first voicemail from my mother. Her voice was tight with anger and fear. "Bailey Alexander Turner, you call me back this instant. You cannot just withdraw financial support because your feelings got hurt. We are family. That means something. Call me back now." Kyle's voicemail was less demanding but equally panicked. "Bro, come on. You know Mom can't afford the house without you. I know you're mad, but this is extreme. Call me back." Natalie's message started with anger, but quickly devolved into tears. "How dare you threaten Mom's housing security because you can't take a joke? Lucas is 8 years old, Bailey. 8. And you're acting like, God, just call me back, please. We need to fix this." Around midnight, even Brian called, leaving a terse message about family obligations and how real men don't abandon their mothers. The hypocrisy was staggering, coming from someone who had just endorsed his son spitting in my food. I turned off my phone completely and placed it in a drawer. Tomorrow, I would deal with the fallout of my decision. Tonight, I needed to rest and prepare for the next steps in reclaiming my dignity and self-respect. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I realized I hadn't felt this unburdened in years. The path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, it was my path to choose. And that made all the difference. Morning sunlight filtered through my blinds as I woke feeling strangely light, despite the confrontation that awaited me. For a moment, I lay there contemplating whether I had made the right decision. Cutting off financial support to my mother was a drastic step. Would a more measured approach have been better? But then I remembered Lucas's proud face as he announced, "Dad says you deserve it," and the laughter that followed. No, I had endured enough. I retrieved my phone from the drawer and powered it on. Immediately, a cascade of notifications filled the screen. 37 missed calls, 63 text messages, 5 voicemails. The family group chat had exploded overnight. The tone had shifted dramatically from the initial anger. The most recent messages were pleading, panicked, from my mother at 3:15 a.m. "Bailey, please call me. We need to talk about this like adults. I don't understand why you're doing this to me." From Kyle at 4:23 a.m. "Dude, I'm sorry about last night. We were all just joking around. You know how Lucas is. Call Mom. She hasn't stopped crying." From Natalie at 5:38 a.m. "Bailey, this is cruel. Mom called me hysterical in the middle of the night. She can't lose the house. Please don't do this to punish all of us for one bad night." There were even messages from Brian, which surprised me given his usual disdain. "Look, things got out of hand last night. Lucas was out of line, and I should have corrected him. Let's talk this through rationally." The sudden concern for my feelings after years of dismissal was transparently self-serving. Not one message contained a genuine apology or acknowledgement of the underlying issues. It was all about the money and the immediate crisis I had created by threatening to withdraw it. I got dressed and headed to my local bank branch as soon as it opened. The lobby was quiet, with just a few early morning customers. Jessica, a personal banker I had worked with before, greeted me warmly. "Bailey, good to see you. What brings you in so early today?" I explained that I needed to cancel an automatic payment arrangement. As she pulled up my account, I found myself telling her more than I had intended. "The payment is for my mother's mortgage. I've been covering most of it for years, but after some recent events, I've realized it's not a healthy arrangement." Jessica's professional demeanor softened slightly. "I understand. Family financial entanglements can be complicated. Let me walk you through the process." As she explained the necessary steps, I could feel my phone vibrating continuously in my pocket. I ignored it, focusing on the task at hand. Jessica seemed to sense my discomfort. "You know," she said quietly as she processed the paperwork, "my brother lived with me rent-free for 3 years. He always had reasons why he couldn't contribute a job that fell through, unexpected expenses, plans to return to school. I kept making excuses for him until my therapist asked me a simple question. Would you accept this behavior from anyone else in your life? The answer was obviously no. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with the people we love most. Her words resonated deeply. Would I accept this treatment from friends or colleagues? Would I continue to financially support someone who laughed while I was deliberately humiliated? The answer was clear. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Jessica asked after completing the cancellation. Actually, yes. I'd like to review all my accounts to make sure there aren't any other payments going to family members that I might have forgotten about. It was time for a complete financial separation. After leaving the bank, I drove to a nearby coffee shop to gather my thoughts. My phone had not stopped buzzing. I finally decided to check it again. Among the frantic messages from my immediate family, I noticed a text from an unexpected source. Lucas. Uncle Bailey, I'm sorry I spit in your food. Dad told me it would be funny, but Mom is really mad at him now and everyone is fighting. Are you going to make Grandma lose her house? The message broke my heart. Lucas was just a child, parroting the behavior he'd been taught. Brian had used his own son as a weapon against me, and now the boy was caught in the crossfire of adult conflicts. I texted back, "Thank you for apologizing, Lucas. I'm not mad at you. The grown-ups need to work some things out. Your grandma won't lose her house, but some things need to change in our family." Almost immediately after sending this, my phone rang. It was Natalie. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Did you just text my son?" she demanded, without preamble. "He texted me to apologize, so I responded." I said calmly, "You had no right to discuss this situation with him. He's completely confused and upset. I didn't discuss anything inappropriate. I accepted his apology and reassured him that Grandma won't lose her house. So you're not going through with it?" Relief flooded her voice. "Thank God you've come to your senses." "I didn't say that," I replied. "I've already canceled the automatic payment. What happens next depends on how we move forward as a family." "What is that supposed to mean? Some kind of ultimatum?" "Not an ultimatum. A boundary. I won't continue to financially support people who treat me with contempt." Natalie's tone shifted from angry to cajoling. "Bailey, you know last night was just an unfortunate incident. Lucas is going through a phase, and Brian had a few drinks. We all love you. You're my big brother. If you love someone, you don't laugh when they're being humiliated," I said quietly. "You don't enable and participate in their mistreatment for years and then expect them to keep giving." There was a long pause before Natalie spoke again, her voice softer. "What do you want from us, Bailey?" "I want acknowledgement of how I've been treated. I want genuine apologies, not just panic because the money might stop. I want respect, moving forward. And I want Lucas to understand that what happened last night was wrong, not funny. And if we do all that, you'll keep paying Mom's mortgage?" The transactional nature of her response told me she still didn't get it. "This isn't a negotiation, Natalie. I'm not listing demands in exchange for payment. I'm telling you what healthy family relationships look like. Whether I continue to help Mom financially will depend on whether I believe anything has genuinely changed." The call ended soon after, with Natalie promising to talk to everyone about my concerns. Her tone made it clear she still saw me as the problem, the unreasonable one who needed to be managed rather than heard. Throughout the day, the messages continued. Kyle oscillated between apologies and accusations of betrayal. My mother sent long paragraphs about everything she had sacrificed for us growing up, how she had always supported me, and how she couldn't believe I would abandon her now. Brian's messages were the most telling. After his initial attempt at reconciliation failed, he reverted to type, "You're proving exactly what I've always said about you. Selfish to the core. Using money to control everyone. Pathetic." By evening, I had reached a decision. I texted the family group. "I'm willing to meet and discuss everything face-to-face. Saturday, 10 a.m., at Riverfront Coffee downtown. Neutral territory. All adults in the family need to be present." The responses came quickly. Everyone agreed to the meeting, though Brian tried to argue for a different location and time, perhaps a final attempt to maintain some control. I held firm. This would be on my terms or not at all. That night, I sat down and made detailed notes about what I wanted to express at the meeting. This wasn't about vengeance or punishment. It was about establishing healthy boundaries and determining whether reconciliation was possible. I also made a list of specific changes I needed to see. First, genuine acknowledgement and apologies from everyone involved. Second, family counseling to address the dysfunctional patterns. Third, clear boundaries around money and expectations. Fourth, Brian would need to stop poisoning Lucas against me. And fifth, everyone would need to commit to treating each other with basic respect. As I reviewed my notes, I realized these weren't outrageous demands. They were the minimum requirements for any healthy relationship. The fact that they felt radical, in the context of my family, revealed just how dysfunctional our dynamic had become. Saturday would determine whether my family was capable of change, or whether I would need to accept that the loving family I had sacrificed so much for existed only in my memories. Saturday morning arrived with a clarity that matched my newfound resolve. I arrived at Riverfront Coffee 20 minutes early to secure a table in the back corner, private enough for our conversation but public enough to discourage any dramatic outbursts. The familiar scent of fresh coffee and pastries would normally have been comforting, but today my stomach was too knotted to consider food. My mother arrived first, 10 minutes before the scheduled time. She looked older than she had just days ago, her face drawn with worry lines. When she spotted me, she hurried over with arms outstretched for a hug. I stood but kept the table between us, extending my hand instead. The hurt that flashed across her face was palpable, but she took my hand briefly before sitting down. "Bailey, this has all gone too far," she began immediately. "I haven't slept in days worrying about losing the house." "The meeting hasn't started yet, Mom," I said calmly. "Let's wait for everyone else." Natalie and Kyle arrived together at exactly 10. Neither made a move to hug me, perhaps taking their cue from my interaction with our mother. Brian was noticeably absent. "Where's Brian?" I asked Natalie as she sat down. She fidgeted with her wedding ring, avoiding my eyes. "He thought it would be better if we handled this as blood family first." "That's convenient," I replied, considering his role in what happened. "He apologized to me," Natalie said defensively. "He knows Lucas's behavior was inappropriate." "His behavior was inappropriate," I corrected. Lucas was following his lead. Before Natalie could respond, a barista approached to take our orders. The mundane transaction provided a brief reprieve from the tension. When she left, I decided to take control of the conversation. I asked for this meeting because what happened at dinner was not an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of disrespect and exploitation. I looked at each of them in turn. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on our family dynamic, and I've realized it's fundamentally unhealthy. "That's a bit dramatic," Kyle interjected with a nervous laugh. "Every family has issues. Spitting in someone's food and collectively laughing about it goes beyond issues," I replied evenly. My mother leaned forward, her voice pleading. "Bailey, Lucas is just a child. He didn't understand what he was doing." "Lucas understood exactly what he was doing, Mom. He told me directly that Brian said I deserved it. That wasn't childish impulsivity. That was deliberate humiliation encouraged by an adult." "So you're punishing all of us because you're angry at Brian?" Natalie asked, her tone accusatory. "Taking away Mom's mortgage payments because your feelings got hurt?" I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. This isn't about punishment. It's about recognizing that I've allowed myself to be used financially while being treated with contempt emotionally. "That stops now." "No one is using you," my mother protested. "We're family. Families help each other." "When have any of you helped me recently?" I asked. The question hung in the air, met with uncomfortable silence. "Can any of you name the last time you did something for me that didn't ultimately benefit yourselves?" Kyle shifted uncomfortably. "You never ask for help. You've always been the strong one, the independent one." "That's not an answer, Kyle. Being the strong one doesn't mean I don't have needs or feelings. It doesn't mean I deserve to be mocked and taken for granted." The barista returned with our drinks, creating another brief pause in the conversation. When she left, Natalie spoke up, her voice softer than before. "What do you want from us, Bailey? Just tell us what you need us to do, and we'll do it. Mom can't lose the house." There it was again, the focus on the financial consequence, rather than the relationship damage. I took a sip of my coffee before responding. "I want several things. First, I want genuine acknowledgement and apologies from everyone involved in what happened, including Brian and Lucas. Second, I want us to commit to family counseling to address the dysfunctional patterns that have developed. Third, I want clear boundaries around money and expectations going forward. Fourth, Brian needs to stop poisoning Lucas against me. And fifth, everyone needs to commit to treating each other with basic respect." My mother looked startled. "Counseling? We don't need outsiders involved in our private business." "That's non-negotiable," I said firmly. "What happened at dinner didn't come from nowhere. It's the result of years of unhealthy dynamics that we need professional help to address." Natalie was shaking her head. "Brian would never agree to counseling. He doesn't believe in that stuff." "Then Brian doesn't need to be part of this family's healing," I replied. "But you'll need to decide where your priorities lie, Natalie." Her eyes widened. "Are you asking me to choose between my husband and my brother?" I'm asking you to choose between a healthy family dynamic and the toxic one we currently have. If Brian wants to be part of this family, he needs to be part of the solution. Kyle, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. What about the mortgage? Are you going to keep paying it while we figure all this out? I'll make the payment for this month to give us time to work through these issues, I said. But my long-term financial support will depend on seeing genuine effort and change from all of you. So you are using money to control us, my mother accused, her expression hardening. No, Mom. I'm using my own money according to my own values. There's a difference. I won't financially support a family system that treats me as less than worthy of basic respect. What about Lucas? Natalie asked, her voice trembling slightly. He adores you, Bailey. Or he did before. He doesn't understand what's happening. Lucas is caught in the middle of adult problems, and that's not fair to him, I agreed. I'm willing to have a separate conversation with him, with your permission. He needs to understand that what happened was wrong, not because I'm punishing everyone, but because we don't treat people we love that way. For the next hour, we continued to talk, circling through the same points repeatedly. My mother vacillated between tearful pleas and angry accusations. Kyle alternated between apologies and minimizing the situation. Natalie seemed torn, clearly uncomfortable with her position between her husband and her family. Progress was minimal, but I held firm on my conditions. By the end of the meeting, we had at least established that I would meet with Lucas separately to talk, and that my mother would consider counseling if it meant that much to me. Kyle had grudgingly acknowledged that his behavior over the years had been self-centered. Natalie had admitted that Brian's attitude toward me was problematic, though she stopped short of saying she would confront him about it. It wasn't the dramatic reconciliation I might have hoped for, but it was a start. As we prepared to leave, my mother asked the question that had clearly been weighing on her mind. So what happens now with the house? I'll make this month's payment, I repeated. After that, it depends on what steps we've taken as a family. If nothing changes, I won't continue to financially support a toxic dynamic. And if we can't afford the payments without you, she pressed, then you'll need to consider other options. Downsizing, taking in a roommate, asking Natalie and Brian to contribute. There are solutions that don't involve me sacrificing my self-respect. We parted with tentative plans to meet again in 2 weeks. As I watched them walk away together, huddled in conversation, I wondered if anything would really change. Had I done the right thing? Or had I just destroyed my relationship with the only family I had? The answer came sooner than expected. That evening, I received a text from Natalie. Lucas wants to talk to you. Brian's not happy about it, but I think it's important. Can we video call tomorrow? Perhaps there was hope after all. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. The road to rebuilding our family would be long and uncertain, but for the first time in years, we were at least acknowledging the need for change. 6 months have passed since that fateful dinner when my nephew spit in my food and my family laughed. 6 months of difficult conversations, setbacks, progress, and slow, painful rebuilding. The journey hasn't been linear, and it certainly hasn't been easy, but looking back, I can see how far we've all come. The video call with Lucas the day after our coffee shop meeting was a turning point. His face appeared on my screen, nervous but determined, with Natalie sitting beside him for support. Uncle Bailey, he began, his voice small, I'm really sorry for spitting in your food. Dad told me it would be funny, but it wasn't funny. It was mean, and I feel really bad about it. The sincerity in his voice brought tears to my eyes. Thank you for apologizing, Lucas. That means a lot to me. Are you still mad at us? He asked, his bottom lip trembling slightly. I'm not mad at you, I assured him. I was hurt by what happened, but I know you're learning and growing. We all make mistakes. The important thing is that we learn from them. We talked for about 20 minutes, keeping the conversation age-appropriate but honest. I explained that families should treat each other with respect and kindness, and that laughing when someone is hurt isn't acceptable behavior. By the end of our call, Lucas was smiling again, asking when he could come visit my apartment and see my cool fish tank like he used to. The situation with the adults in my family proved more complicated. As expected, Brian initially refused to participate in family counseling, dismissing it as touchy-feely nonsense. This created significant tension between him and Natalie, who, to my surprise, stood firm on the importance of healing our family relationships. My mother was reluctant at first, but the reality of potentially losing her house provided powerful motivation. The first session was awkward and defensive, with more deflection than progress. But our therapist, Dr. Rivera, was skilled at cutting through the excuses and getting to the heart of our dysfunctional patterns. "Margaret," he said to my mother, during our third session, "when you defend your younger children's disrespectful behavior toward Bailey, what message do you think that sends?" My mother's response was telling: that I love all my children equally. Or perhaps, Dr. Rivera suggested gently that you value peace over justice, that avoiding conflict is more important than ensuring everyone in the family is treated with dignity. These sessions were painful but necessary, bringing to light patterns that had been operating beneath the surface for decades. We discovered that my mother's behavior stemmed partly from guilt over leaning so heavily on me after our father died. Rather than acknowledging this dependency, which made her uncomfortable, she had overcompensated by indulging Kyle and Natalie. Kyle's reliance on me was rooted in childhood dynamics, where he never had to develop self-sufficiency because I was always there to catch him when he fell. And Natalie's willingness to side with Brian against me came from her fear of rocking her marital boat, having witnessed our mother's struggles as a single parent. Understanding these patterns didn't excuse the behavior, but it helped us address the root causes rather than just the symptoms. As for my financial support, I stayed true to my word. I made the mortgage payment for that first month after our confrontation, but then held firm on needing to see real change before continuing. This created genuine hardship for my mother, who had to scramble to cover the shortfall. Natalie and Brian reluctantly contributed some money, though far less than what I had been paying. By the third month, with progress in our therapy sessions and visible efforts from everyone, I agreed to pay half of what I had previously contributed. This compromise acknowledged the steps being taken while maintaining the boundary that my financial support was not unconditional. Perhaps the most surprising development came from Brian. After initially boycotting the family sessions, he agreed to join a private session with just Natalie, Dr. Rivera, and me. His hostility was palpable at first, but as the session progressed, something unexpected emerged. Brian's antagonism toward me stemmed partly from his own insecurities about providing for his family. "You swoop in with your money and your perfect job," he admitted grudgingly, making me look like less than a man in my own family. Natalie always talking about how her big brother would help, how her big brother solved problems. Do you know what that feels like? It was the first honest communication we'd ever had, and while it didn't immediately transform our relationship, it opened a door to understanding that had previously been closed. The most profound changes, though, happened within me. For years, I had based my worth in the family on what I could provide, believing that if I just gave enough, did enough, sacrificed enough, I would eventually earn the love and respect I craved. Through therapy and a lot of personal reflection, I came to understand that genuine love isn't earned through sacrifice. It's freely given through mutual respect and care. I began to build a life centered on my own well-being rather than caretaking for my family. I joined a hiking club where I met people who appreciated my company without expecting anything in return. I started dating Sarah, a kindergarten teacher who showed me what healthy reciprocity in a relationship looks like. I even adopted a dog from the local shelter, a scruffy terrier mix named Max, who greets me with unconditional joy every day. Today, our family is still a work in progress. We continue our bi-weekly therapy sessions, though now they focus more on building healthy communication than addressing past wounds. My mother has downsized to a smaller house that she can afford with minimal help from me. Kyle has finally maintained steady employment for 4 months, the longest in his adult life. Natalie and I have rebuilt much of our sibling bond, and she's become more willing to establish boundaries with Brian for the sake of family harmony. And Lucas? He's thriving with the more consistent and respectful family dynamics. Last weekend, he spent the day with me at the Science Museum, asking thoughtful questions and sharing his dreams of becoming a marine biologist. As we watched the sea turtles glide through their aquarium habitat, he slipped his small hand into mine. "Uncle Bailey," he said, looking up at me with serious eyes. I'm glad you didn't stay away forever. Dad says sometimes people have to stand up for themselves to be respected. Is that what you did? The wisdom from the mouth of a 9-year-old nearly undid me. Yes, Lucas. That's exactly what I did. The lesson I've learned through all of this is that true family isn't defined by blood or obligation. It's built on mutual respect, genuine care, and the willingness to grow together. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do both for yourself and for those you care about is to establish firm boundaries and hold people accountable for how they treat you. Walking away from toxic relationships isn't about punishment. It's about creating space for healthier ones to develop. And sometimes, the very act of walking away is what creates the possibility for genuine reconciliation. I don't know what the future holds for my family. We may continue to heal and grow together, or we may find that some relationships can never fully recover. But I know with certainty that I will never again sacrifice my dignity and self-respect for the illusion of family harmony. Real love doesn't demand that you make yourself smaller or accept mistreatment. Real love lifts you up, acknowledges your worth, and respects your boundaries. It took a painful awakening for me to learn this truth, but now that I know it, it guides every relationship in my life. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did you find the courage to stand up for yourself when it meant potentially losing relationships that were important to you? Share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about navigating complex family dynamics. Remember that you deserve respect and healthy relationships, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is believe that truth enough to act on it. Thank you for listening, and I wish you courage and clarity on your own journey. When my nephew spat in my dinner plate and everyone laughed, I discovered just how toxic my family had become. This shocking Reddit family drama escalated after my mother texted, "Don't contact us again," and I replied by ending mortgage payments. Witness the immediate fallout as the family chat exploded with panic. After years of financial exploitation and emotional disrespect, I finally established boundaries, sparking a journey of painful confrontations and healing. This Reddit family drama illustrates how standing up for yourself can transform toxic relationships. Our therapy sessions revealed deep-seated patterns that had poisoned our interactions for years. Like many Reddit family drama situations, reconciliation wasn't simple, but setting firm boundaries created space for genuine change. The ultimate Reddit family drama lesson: true family is built on mutual respect, not obligation. Sometimes walking away is necessary before real healing can begin. If you've experienced similar Reddit family drama, share your story below.